So we've been talking about God over the last several weeks. And we've asked the question, what if God really is? And we've kind of gone over several metaphors. And I think that's almost the only way we can really talk about God, in metaphor. Because, well, let me just start like this. When I was younger, I got one of these. Maybe you did too. I went to church and they gave me one of these. They said, this is who he is, this is how you do it, this is what's going on. Just make sure that you show up every week and bring this with you, and everything will be fine. And it really wasn't very appealing to me. Although, I just thought everybody had a God in a box. And, this was the age of when kind of personalized things were important. Do you remember the first time you saw a Walkman? And now, you watch an old movie and you see somebody with a cassette playing Walkman and you go, look at that, wow. That was a personal stereo, right? Kind of new. I mean, before that, personal stereos were AM radio transistors with a little white cord that you stuck in your ear to listen to the baseball game. They weren't all that satisfying, but a Walkman, now that was a personal music system that you could kind of wrap your head around, and it was nice. And so a lot of us think about God, a lot of us did think about God like this. This is my personal God. I keep him in the box, I let him out whenever I need him, and if life is going well, then this kind of a God works just fine. But when it doesn't, I soon begin to understand that a God in a box is not exactly in fact, not at all what God is. And so we've been trying over the last several weeks to kind of open up the box and let God be God. And it's almost impossible to do that without metaphor. Because our language begins to drop away, and when you go from humanity to God and kind of get exacting with who God is, you begin to humanize and kind of anthropomorphize God, and so that you reduce God so that God is no longer God. And so we've been trying to do this, to do it in a healthy way, understand more about God with these metaphors. And so I ask, what if God really is as delicious as a homegrown peach? Wouldn't that be nice? I mean, if God was like juicy, a little fuzzy, of course, but delicious. And I have to tell you that the God of my youth wasn't. In fact, he was kind of like a wax peach. You know, the ones that people have, the false fruit. They used to have this in New Jersey when I was growing up. Everybody, right, Gary, Tori? Everybody had a bowl of wax or plastic fruit on their coffee table. Remember those days? That's the God that I was taught about. He's kind of looked like a peach, but wasn't. But the real one, the God who is kind of in us and all around us and kind of holding it all together, is delicious and juicy. If that's so, then the question is, then what? Next week we said, what if God is really as brilliant and caring as an intimate logistics officer? And that doesn't do it justice, but the idea that there are things needed in certain places, and there are certain people with gifts to meet those needs and resources. And one of the things that God does is he's kind of like a logistics officer, deploying people to different places around town and saying, okay, I know this person needs this and you have it, so all of a sudden you find yourself face to face with a person who may need what you have. Could be as simple as a hug and a smile, or as complicated as a check. Or, to get really complicated, a long-term relationship. What if God really is like an intimate logistics officer? Then what? That's my question. We said, what if God is as creative and concerned with beauty as a gifted artist? A friend of mine was in Yosemite a few weeks ago, and she took a picture of Half Dome and texted it to me. Is there a more brilliant rock formation. The artist is the same artist that made you. Now I know, again, it's complicated, but there is a benevolent force in the universe that holds everything together, that's behind everything from the beauty of Half Dome and why we think it's beautiful, to the creation of a brand new baby, to the sustaining your life. There is a benevolent force in the universe that's in all of it and lives through all of it and becomes part of all of it, and that is what we refer to as God. God is like a creative and gifted artist. Now, I thought, as I was looking at that picture of Half Dome, about why we call it Half Dome. Why do we call it Half Dome? Thank you, Matt. Not that complicated, is it? And that's exactly what it is. And then I thought about the day when that other half broke away. Who knows when? Probably in some ice age long ago. And it was cataclysmic. But without that breaking away, Half Dome wouldn't be Half Dome. And then I thought about the way God works in my life and the things that He does to break things away. And it's often cataclysmic, but without those cataclysmic cleavages, I wouldn't be who I'm becoming. God is like a gifted artist. If that's so, then what? We said, what if God is really wild and undomesticated as a mountain lion? That's one of the things I hate so much about the box is we've shrunken God. But what if God is wild and untamed? What if God doesn't do what you want God to do whenever you want God to do it? What if God is not just like this celestial vending machine? And that was really the beginning of all of this kind of thinking for me took place when I began to ask God for things that I thought I deserved. I was a good person. I prayed. In essence, I put in my quarters, and I hit the button, and guess what? Nothing. Now, I don't know about you, but when that happens to me in real life, literally, I begin to shake the machine. Do you do that? Or do you just write a note like the machine tells you or make the phone call? They won't call you back. Shake the machine. And so you shake the machine and you go, okay, God, maybe that prayer wasn't hard enough. And then do you ever have someone tell you this? I have many times. Well, you really have to mean it. And so that means I wasn't sincere enough, apparently. But I knew that I couldn't, how do you mean something more, right? How do you really mean it? Now, I grew up in the culture that where my mother and father, as beautiful as they are, settled arguments between my brothers and my sister and I by saying things like, you tell your sister you're sorry. I'm sorry. Well, I was no more sorry than the man in the moon, right? In fact, at the very next opportunity, I would do it again. This time, though, I wouldn't get caught. That's just the way it is. And so when someone says you have to mean it, I don't understand how I can mean something more. I understand sincere and insincere. But how can I become more sincere about something? So what I translated that into was that I had to work harder, that I had to be better, that I had to kind of make God want to honor those 2 quarters. Does that make sense? Surely if I, fill in the blank, then when I ask God for fill in the blank, He's going to be compelled to give it to me. Well, guess what? Yeah, right? That doesn't work. God is not sitting around waiting for you to say, tell Him what you need and then let you have it all the time. I have found that I don't really know what is best for me sometimes. And then last week, and this was my favorite, I have to say. I think this typifies God more than any other metaphor that we've used. What if God really is as relentless in his quest as an insatiable lover? You know, I think that every human being has this deep need to be loved. Don't you? You agree with that? No? Yes? And I don't mean to be manipulative, but I think I'm going to go beyond that. Test this week. I think beyond that, every human being has a deep need to be desired. Desired. Not only loved, but desired. Like, isn't it nice to be pursued? Not by the cops. It's not what I mean. But by someone that you value. When I feel as if I'm being pursued, my sense of value begins to bloom in a way that almost nothing else makes it bloom. And I think it's because I grew up so long with this idea of love and realized that, you know, you have to love, right? This is a commandment. Love God, love everyone else. You have to love people. So growing up, that was it. You've got to love. You've got to love. You don't have any choice but to love. And I separated somehow in my mind love and desire. But when I began and I continue to unpack the idea that God, again, not old white guy in the sky with a big gray beard, but the benevolent force in the universe that holds everything together in love, when that God is actually in pursuit of me. And the first thing I think of is why, and the second thing I think of is, could that be true? And most of the time that's where I stop. Because there's something in me that thinks it couldn't really be true. But if it could be true, it seems that must have been what Jesus was talking about when the rabbi started talking about good news. I have good news. So, if God really is all of those things, and, you know, that's my best, those are my best descriptions given the weeks that I had. If God really is, then if so, then what? What does that mean? What does that mean for a human being? If God is that, then what? Well, here's a thought. It's in your notes on the board. If there is a God, and that God is like this, then I would like to be more closely connected to him. Now, again, forgive my pronouns because they don't do God justice. I would like to experience God myself, and for myself, discover if these things are true, and who or what God is, and what that means in my life. That's how I feel about this. If this God exists, and he's like this, then I want to experience God in that kind of a way and begin to unpack what that means. So then I go, okay, well, how do I do that? Are you guys with me? Are we all together? Is it too hot and stuffy in here and I'm losing you? From the beginning to the end. And from the beginning to the end of what? Well, the book that I use most is this book, the Bible. But I also have several other books in my office that are filled with spiritual wisdom. Tao Te Ching, I love. Sufi poets, I love. And others. From the beginning to the end of almost any tradition. And I say almost because I don't know them all. But the ones that I have been trafficking in, from the beginning to the end of those traditions, people are engaged in at least two practices in order to come to a place where they experience a God like that more and more on a regular basis. And when I say experience Him, I mean more and more on a regular basis, but not being crazy. Because some people who say they experience God are just crazy. Have you met anyone like that? What are they? Well, I'm going to be brief. There's two that I want to talk about today that are important, and you can begin them right away. And see, this is it. I love this about God, is that all through the Scripture, God says, well, try it out. Taste and see. Come and follow me. See if this isn't true. Test me in this one. So this is kind of like a human being coming to God and saying, okay, you know what? I'm going to commit to these two things and see if you show up. See, the beautiful thing is that you're already okay. But these two things help you realize it. Does that make sense? You already have everything you need. When Jesus, my rabbi, showed up and he began teaching, he immediately made enemies because he would say things like this. And it's beyond me, but he would come into a room and he would say things like, your sins, and then there's a comma. I love this editorial comment, which are many, are forgiven. Now, I want you to understand a point of clarification. He did not say that because he just forgave those sins. And by the way, what is a sin? A sin is simply missing the mark. What mark? The mark that, if a mark is the bullseye that love would hit if given the same situation. So if I say something that is missed the mark, what I've done is my kind of sinful words are the difference between what I say and what love would have said. Does that make sense? So your sins, which are many, are now forgiven. He wasn't at that moment forgiving sins. What he was doing is saying, this is that which is already true of you, however you do not yet know it. When I was growing up, I was raised in a Catholic tradition, and for a while I went to confession, and then that was quite an ordeal for me. And I would sit in the booth, and I would tell the father, usually I would make up stuff. Because, I was 10, 11 years old. What could I do? And I wanted to have, I want some good sin stuff. So I would say, I've done this and this and this, and he would say, you are forgiven, now do this and this and this. But in the catechism, what I learned was that at that moment when the priest said those words, that I was already forgiven. He was just telling me what was already true. 1 John chapter 1, verse 9 says, if you confess your sins, he is faithful and just to forgive you your sins. What does that mean? Does that mean that I'm not forgiven until I confess? No. It means that my very confession, and confession doesn't mean I'm sorry. Confession means to say the same thing about that choice that God, this love, says about the choice. You missed it that time, big guy, right? So when I say the same thing about that choice that God says about that choice, I realize that was wrong. I kind of make a mid-course correction. But what my biggest realization is that even that has been forgiven. Now, what is forgiveness? Forgiveness is God saying, I will never bring this up against you. Never. It's gone. Gone. I digress. Certainly. I don't know how I got there. But two practices. First one is this. Be still. Just stop. This is very easy for Americans. And the beautiful thing is that we're coming into a season, Christmas, that's really relaxing. Be still. What does it mean to be still? Well, first of all, here's some passages. Psalm chapter 46 says, "Be still and know that I am." Be still before the Lord, all mankind. These verses are in your notes and the references are given. The Lord will fight for you when you cease fighting. Isn't that amazing? That's one of the most amazing passages I saw all week. Because what I think I need to do is fight my fights, right? I need to stick up for myself. And then I go, so I'm sticking up for myself, like usually verbally, just going at it with whoever is wrong, because I'm certainly right. And like midway through, I'm going, okay, God, show up here. And I'm popping my quarters in the machine, and God's not showing up. And then I read this passage that says that God will fight for me when I stop fighting. Be still. Just be still. I'm beginning to think, I know that everybody here who's been here a while gets the hives when I start talking about the two sisters. Especially Tori. I don't know why. Tori just breaks out in a rash. I'm sorry. I'm going to talk about it a little differently this morning. Remember these two sisters? I'm not going to read. I'm going to just kind of tell it. The rabbi and his disciples are traveling. Two sisters who love him, know him, invite them in for lunch, and the two sisters are Mary and Martha, right? And Martha is busy making lunch, and Mary is sitting quietly. Mary is being still, listening. Martha is not happy because 50% of her workforce is not in the kitchen, right? And she comes out and she gets angry with God in the form of Jesus. Lord, don't you care? So just hear me now. I just want you to walk through this. What if this has a metaphorical meaning for us for just a second? And one of the clues that I am not being still, but that I am agitated, that I'm doing too much, that I am coming apart at the seams because of my hyperactivity, is that I begin to question the goodness and benevolence of God. God, don't you care? Quarter after quarter, right? The quarter Martha was putting in the machine was, get my sister to help me. I need help out here. Get my sister to help me. Now Jesus looks at her and says, Martha, Martha, you are worried and upset about many things. That's us. One thing is necessary, and Mary has chosen it. And I will not take it from her. I will not get her involved in your nonsense. Right? She chose, you chose. What if there's a Mary and Martha going on all of the time in all of us? And when someone comes over to the house, we can choose to be Mary or Martha. I think this is the case. I can choose to sit quietly, or I can choose to perform like a trained monkey. That's what I do. Because I want you to think that I'm talented. I want you to like what, Martha wanted him to like what she cooked. Wanted to, and all of the reasons are good. They could be good, but you don't need to do any of it. Just stop. I have a Mary heart, and I have a Martha heart. My Martha heart, if we have people coming over, makes me want to clean the house and cut the grass and make sure. Now, there's nothing wrong with those things. My Mary heart wants to just be still. Be still and enjoy the people that are coming over. So, be still. How do we do that? Well, I'm going to suggest that for 15 minutes twice a day, you do that. Now, this is a kindergarten level, which is where a lot of us need to start. But some of you are already doing some things, and so that's not what I mean for you. But if this hasn't been the case, then here's how you do it. You get alone in a quiet place for 15 minutes, and you sit still, close your eyes, and just pay attention to your breathing for 15 minutes. Set an alarm. At first, it'll seem like the alarm is never going to go off. And this is what happens to me when I first began this practice, when I was just being still. This is what happened to me. A voice in my head. Do you have one of those? A voice in my head began saying things like this. You know you have important things to do right now. This is nonsense. What is supposed to be happening? You know you're not good at this. You know that you're a doer, and you know that, and so to-do lists began pouring. And at first I listened to them. But what I realized was that there was a lot of crap that had to get kind of puked out of my brain, and it took a lot of being quiet for that all to kind of go, okay, are you done? But so now, when I'm quiet, and I use a prayer rope, and I breathe, when I'm quiet, something happens. If I'm quiet for 30 minutes, this is what I know is true. Nothing externally has changed in that 30 minutes. The economy is no different. My mortgage is the same. My children are the same. My job is the same. My car is the same. My parents are the same. My family is the same. Everything is exactly as it was when I began, but I am in a new space of peace with them all because I changed. Martha, you are worried and upset about many things. But one thing is necessary. Mary has chosen it. Just be still. Now, I know for you, like for me, that's not easy. It's work. But here's my deal. Do it. I don't care if you like it or not. Just do it. If you want to come into a proximity with this one that we've been talking about, you have to be still. Why? Why? Because God isn't loud. And He won't compete with all the other things that we let in. He just won't. Story after story after story that I don't have time to tell, but the most fun one is in 1 Kings chapter 19. There's a man named Elisha who's a prophet, and he is, talk about a trained monkey. This guy can do it all. Like any miracle you want, Elijah can do it. And so he's in the midst of all of this like power stuff. Like he's doing the voodoo on, it's just amazing. And it seems like God is at his beck and call. And then this woman named Jezebel. Anybody know anyone who named their daughter Jezebel? Not a lot of Jezebels. This woman named Jezebel hates him and says, I am going to kill you in 24 hours. And somehow Elisha's heart just shrank and he ran into the desert 1 day, 2 days, and he finally fell exhausted and he started to whine to God. Again, bing, 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 bing. God, don't you care? As soon as you pray that prayer, I want you to hear yourself and go, okay, something's wrong. He says this, God, don't you care that this is so funny because this is like Christians, quote unquote, today. Don't you care that the whole United States is going to hell in a handbasket and I think I'm the only one left? That happened 4,000 years ago. And God said, here, Elijah, have something to eat. And then take a nap. And this happened twice. And then God said, why are you here, Elisha? And Elisha said, well, I want to see you. I need to come in closer connection with you. And amazing things happened. An earthquake shook this mountain, but the writer says God wasn't in the earthquake. And this unbelievable wildfire swept through the mountain, but God wasn't in the wildfire. And then the Hebrew gets very mysterious. It says, and then there was silence in the silence, and God spoke. Indeed, it's the only way He will. Silence in the silence. If you want to connect with God, you have to be still. One more practice. Liken unto the first. You have to draw near to God. What does that mean? Now again, remember the God that I'm asking you to draw near to. Here are some passages. Come near to God and He will come near to you. Let us draw near to God with a sincere heart. There's that sincere heart thing. So how can I give myself a sincere heart? Well, here's the deal. You don't have to gauge how sincere you are. If you want to do this, then do it, and you're being sincere. You know if you are or not, right? That's all. Draw near to God. Listen to this. Holy smokerinos. For in Him, the Apostle Paul writes, or Luke writes about Paul in Acts 17, in Him we live and move and have our being. See, God is not so much a being as the ground of all being. Now, I know that that seems less tangible than ever. But God is not a being. He's not an object. She is the ground of all being. And again, in a metaphor that does disservice to God, God is not a vegetable, but the ground that all vegetables grow from. God is not a being, but the ground of all being. And the interesting thing is where the Apostle Paul is talking about this. He's talking to a group of philosophers in Athens in the first century. Now, these are great thinking people. And the Apostle Paul comes to Athens, and he has a few days layover, and so he goes to the Areopagus, the Acropolis, this hillside where people just spout philosophy. And Paul says, let me tell you about a different kind of God. The God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth, and He does not live in temples built by hands. He's not served by human hands as if He needed anything, because He Himself gives all men life and breath and everything else. From one man He made every nation of men that they should inhabit the whole earth, and He determined the times set for them and the exact places. And God did this so that men would seek Him and perhaps reach out for Him and find Him, though He is not far from any one of us. For in Him we live and move and have our being. Philosophers wanted to understand the God concept. Paul said, can't do it, but I honor your seeking. Draw near to Him. Draw near to God. Without faith, it's impossible to please God. Well, I don't have any faith. I get that. It's a great starting place. You have to understand, though, faith is not certitude. He's not saying, unless you really know that I exist, and that Joe is actually talking about the real me, unless you know that for sure, you can't make me happy. That's not what he's saying. He's saying without faith, without this kind of a belief that goes, you know what, don't know if this is actually true, but I'm willing to try. That's what faith is. Without faith, it's impossible to please God. Because if you don't have faith, this kind of idea that, yes, this could be true, if you're living in the, yes, I know this is true, and this is who God is, you've missed it. Because if you know the facts about the God that you're referring to, you're no longer talking about the real God, because He can't be known that way. Anyone who comes to Him must believe that He exists, and that He rewards those who seek Him. That's why we call this the quest. We are looking How do I do that? So, again, 2 practices. Be still. Take time out of your day and be still. By the way, Thursday nights here in this room, Brian Malone leads a meditation class that will teach you more fully how to be still in a beautiful way. 7 o'clock on Thursday nights. You should come. Try that out. So how do I then draw near to God? Well, let me give you 3 ideas. These aren't the only 3. They're the 3 that kind of struck me this week as being ways to begin. 1, speak to God honestly. So let me give you an example. Hi, God, it's Joe. I don't know if you're there or not. I don't know if you exist or not. I don't know how much you have had to do with this or that, but I'm here, and I want to know. I want to draw near to you. And so it's me, and I'm talking to you. Okay, that's it for today. It's a great place to start. And then look for God openly. Pay attention. Someone was telling me right before the service how they see God and kind of join Him in the day-to-day things, and a lot of it's not big stuff, but God shows up. And when you're beginning to have a sense of awareness of this God, you begin to see things that way, in a new light. Now that doesn't mean... I love and this, it doesn't not mean this either, but it's so funny when someone comes and tells me something and says, oh, so isn't God great? Like, what do they say? Well, I was running really late, and I had to get to the mall and get a few things and then get out, and there was a parking spot right in front of Macy's. Isn't God great? Or really, I was walking across the street down on Van Ness, and I was just kind of zoned out and doing some texting, and I felt the guy reach out and pull me back, and a bus went by, and if the guy wasn't there to pull me back, I would have gotten hit by a bus. Isn't God great? Now, it's funny that there's no laughter on that one, right? Because what would we say if, see, this is what we do. What would we say if we did get hit with a bus? God sucks. Doesn't God suck? I couldn't find a parking spot. And I drove around and around, and I was late for my appointment, and it was terrible. Isn't God, couldn't He just give me... When things go good, God is awesome. But God isn't always in that. Remember, Half Dome is Half Dome because there was a great cleaving away. And then an idea that I think is beautiful is to review with God, frankly, at the end of your day. Church fathers have a name for this, but just sit down and go, okay, God, it's me again. Remember me? We talked this morning. I just want to go through the day and see if I could recognize where you may have shown up and where you didn't, and where I was disappointed, and where things, and you just openly talk about your day. I believe if you can be still, and if you can draw nigh to God, draw near to Him, to her, that you will begin to sense a God that is like we've been talking. And there's more than this. You know there's more than this. There's more than what we can see. And I'm not going to be able to prove that to you, nor do I want to. I don't want to spend 1 second trying to. But what I want you to do is just to take a few minutes every day and see if it's true. By opening yourself up to the God who is there in these 2 ways. On the back table, there is a prayer that I pray every day that I love. Let me just read it to you. It's not new to you if you've been here a few weeks. the prayer of the Optima elders, and the prayer of the Optima elders asterisk because I changed it, but they won't mind. They're dead. I pray this prayer in the morning, and it's kind of my way of saying, okay, God, here it is. It's Joe, just checking in. Grant unto me, Lord, that with peace of mind I greet all that this new day has to bring. Grant unto me grace to dedicate myself completely to do what you would like me to do. For every hour of this day, instruct and prepare me in all things. Whatsoever news I receive during the day, help me to accept it tranquilly in the firm conviction that all eventualities fulfill your will. Govern my thoughts and feelings in all I do and say. When things unforeseen occur, let me not forget that all comes from you. Teach me to behave sincerely and reasonably towards every member of my family, that I may bring them no confusion or sorrow. Bestow upon me, God, strength to endure the fatigue of the day and to bear my part in all of its passing events. I place all of my resources and time at your disposal. I only ask that you make me more aware of the needs at hand and how I can join you in meeting them. Guide thou my will and teach me to pray, to believe, to hope, to suffer, to forgive, and to love. That prayer changes me because I'm aware then of what may not be apparent. So, it's simple. If you want to come into closer proximity to the God that we've been describing, you have to be still and you have to draw yourself in. That's all I know. Those prayers, copies of them are on the back table on your way out. If you want to talk about this more, send me an email and we'll have a coffee. The next 3 weeks before Advent starts the last Sunday in November. But for 3 weeks in November, we're going to talk about the interrelationship between three things: gratitude, worry, and peace. Gratitude, worry, and peace. So, Father, help us to live in this in a way that gives us the opportunity to experience who you really are. Thank you. Amen.
You are so beautiful. To me.